fine. Yeah, it didn't start right away, I guess. Anyway, I hope everybody out there is doing fine today. It's Thursday, kind of a cool day for me, but one of those days where it was ideal to do a little grocery shopping, and actually, we found some sweet corn, which is early for this year, at the Walmart, and we bought some and had some of it for lunch. And I'll tell you what, it was good. It was sweet, somewhat fresh. It wasn't like picked today or anything, but it was actually good sweet corn, and it's the first sweet corn we've had this year. So made for one heck of a day. What I wanted to talk today about was the charm of a small town. Now, I know we spent a lot of time here for a while talking about all the things that can go wrong in small town America. But today I wanted to tell you some of the experiences I've had in small towns. And in fact, I live in a small town right now, although it's bigger than that town we talked about called Otter Creek. This town I live in is about 1,200 people. It's pretty decent. When we first checked it out, it was pretty much debt-free. It is no longer debt-free due to EPA regulations. A few years ago, we had to put a brand new sewer treatment plant, and that was expensive. And when you have 1,200 people in town, and you have about $2 million in increased costs that have to be done almost overnight, the EPA is not very forgiving, and they want things done right now. We had never failed a test, and yet we were told we weren't going to be able to meet future standards because we were behind times. Our plant was about 14 years old. It was actually in pretty fair shape. So it kind of throws me a little bit, but then the EPA has a awful big governing power. When they come in and they bring the hammer down on you, there's not a whole lot of defending. So there you go. Anyway, our sewer and water doubled overnight. That was that quick. And it's got a 5 or 6% increase automatically put in there forever. And if it's not needed, then they just drop it out. But it's there in case they need it. It doesn't go up for a vote again. It's already been done through once. And so it's perpetual increase in tax, something I didn't even know about before, but I do now. And it seems like a lot of taxes are that way. They are perpetual, and they increase on their own. Oh, let's see what else I got here. Oh, yeah. The charm of living in a small town. But way, way back when, this is before our twin girls were born, we had moved to a small town that had a job offer to work in an office. I just finished some courses that I took not too long after I got out of the military, and thought I wanted to work in the office. And it was a job as a designer, tool designer. And it paid decent. So we had to have a town to live in, and a friend of mine lived in a small little place that he lived just outside of the town, and there was around 80 people there that lived, and it wasn't too bad a place. The only thing I learned a lesson. One was, you don't want to live too near railroad tracks. There was 2 houses between me and the railroad tracks, so when the railroad goes through, you can hear it. And since there's a road going across the tracks, guess what? They blow the horn when they come through town. Yeah. By the way, while I lived there, there was a car hit there. Sometimes things happen at railroad tracks, especially that one didn't have a gate that comes down. So some of those seem to have more accidents, even though there's plenty of signs and warnings and stuff, and they blow the horn. Every once in a while, they will get something. Usually it's like a farm truck or something, but and where I lived was because the town's so small, just about everybody lives near farm fields because the town is surrounded by farm fields completely. And as it was there, most of them were corn. So when the corn was in, you could really be isolated. Yes. But I was going to tell you then, we moved there, and my wife, well, she had twins. Trying to think, we about 4 months after we moved in there, we had twins. And it was a big deal in a small town like that. You know, everybody comes out and you get cards and well wishers and people wanting to see the babies and stuff, and volunteers for babysitting. And I guess in the history of the town, there was one other set of twins, and it happened to be the only tavern in town. That guy, he had twin girls, him and his wife. And I had made friends with him right off the bat. We moved there. I used to have a stop and have a beer sometimes. Not a lot of them, obviously. And across from him was the supper club. And the house we'd moved into was a duplex. That guy that owned the supper club lived on the other side of the duplex. So, and we did go up there every once in a while to the supper club. Not real often. We didn't have a whole lot of money, being young and having 4 kids shortly after we moved in. We had 2 boys already before the twins were born. And, of course, everybody welcomes you. The preacher comes over. They did have a church there as well. And the church was 2 blocks from my house. The whole town wasn't very long, 4 blocks long by about 4 blocks. And the guy that owned the duplex I lived in, he owned one of the businesses. There was a business there that sells ammonia for the farmers. And I'm trying to think what else he had there. Might have been the LP, might have had the LP business as well. So he owned most of the property along the tracks that was in the city limits there. And his business was there all along that thing there. Great big huge tanks, and a couple of those control houses they have so that they can meter things out of there. He was a pretty busy guy most of the time. And oh yeah, we had our own fire department, volunteer fire department, and I was only there about a month, and I think the fire chief come by and talked me into joining the fire department. And of course, I didn't know anything about it. And first thing you know, you're signed up on the training roster for not only there, but for the next little town down the road. Next little town had about 8,000, I think, in it. So it was quite a bit bigger than our town. And they had a great big lake where the practice was going on and the teaching, and they had a great big area up on top. And when you volunteer for something like that, you don't realize how much there is to it. And they give you a badge. You get this little badge you can wear. And of course, you never know when you're going to get called up. Mostly around there, you're fighting fires or something of that nature. They're out in the near country, and it's mostly brush fire. While I was there, we never did have a house catch on fire. So luckily, I never had to go fight something like that. But we did have to maintain equipment and training, like I say. I know I hadn't been there too long, and of course, you make friends with everybody on the fire department. And there was an older fellow on there that he was retired, and he did a lot of the touch-up stuff on the equipment while everybody else would be at work. He was there during the daytime, and sometimes he'd drive the truck out, and the guys would meet wherever we had to put a fire out. But during a practice, we were at the lake in the next town going through some pretty extensive training, but when the two fire departments get together, sometimes your team doesn't work exactly the same. And whenever you have high pressure hoses, you make a loop and put a tie down where they cross so that you can stop a hose from whipping. And it's a lot easier to handle. So anyway, the guys had tied the loop in there, and it was pointed in a direction like this. And the older guy that worked, or that was part of the department, happened to walk near the hose, and somebody clicked the hose on, thought that the two men that were handling the hose were there on it, and they were not. And this hose whipped a little bit, caught the older guy, hit him in the face, knocked him into the lake. And by the time we'd got him out, it knocked a lens out of his eye here. He was in pretty rough shape, and that was probably the biggest injury we had. And of course, it was our oldest fellow on the fire department, and that's just one of them things. But it makes you extra cautious, and some of the training you go through, it hits home. Then you know it's serious, and it was very serious. And I don't know how much sight he ever regained back in that eye. You know, this is a long time ago. I was in my 20s. I think I was about 24 when that happened, so pretty young. Maybe I was 23. I was young, no. Oh, what's next? Oh, yeah. We lived there quite a while, and then moved into the country right outside of another small town. And at that time, I had gotten another offer for another place. I worked in an office as a automation designer and tool designer. And while I was there, I ended up eventually I left there and went into construction because construction paid so much more, and I wasn't making quite enough in an office really to take care of everything with my family. When I lived in that first little town, I used to farm part-time for the dairy farm, which was one of the first farms going out of town, going back to the west and a little bit north. I could pretty much pick my own hours. You know, it's a dairy farm. I mean, you're operating from dusk to, I mean, it's dark in the morning and dark at night when you're done. I've had a few lunches sitting on the tractor seat. So just to give you an idea, once you get up there, it's go, go, go till you're done. And then I worked second shift at the place for the outfit in town. So it was a go, go, go. Just no rest for the weary, I guess, at that time. Like I say, when you're young, you need the money. And when our twins came, I didn't have insurance. But the small town you never forget, because everybody comes over and they want to make friends, and we didn't, you know, we had a sheriff's department that took care of as far as policing in town. We didn't have a night marshal or anything like that. It was good times. You get a lot of invitations, picnics, and it's just back then. I don't know if it's different now or not. I mean, I live in a small town. We have similar circumstances here. But like I say, that was quite a deal. Well, then in construction, of course, you move around a little bit. And a few years later, we did move into another small town. And I was still in construction. And at that time, that's when I decided to start a business up. And we weren't there very long, and made friends with just about everybody that had a business. And in that little town, we had 3 taverns. And we had a Catholic church kind of in the middle of the town, beautiful church. And there was a rod and gun club. And the rod and gun club had almost as many members There's 55 of us and 55 acres. Each person had the rights of a equivalent of an acre, but you were a co-owner of the club when you came in. And it had to be 100% of anybody that was there to vote you in. And as it was, shortly after I'd moved in there, one of the members had passed away, and I was asked if I wanted to be considered for membership, and I said, yeah. And you go down, and they have these smokers every so often, and smokers where you play cards and a little gambling here and there, raising money for the club. And they had two nice, great big ponds stocked with fish. I mean, this thing was gorgeous. This place, 2-story home that was made into a clubhouse with a working kitchen in it, and we had a place out there that if we caught fish somewhere and we wanted to get them cleaned up before we actually would clean them, it was a tank that had spring water coming into it, pretty good sized concrete tank. And you just throw your fish in there, and then there's a big net. You catch your fish back out. When you in a day or two, it clean a lot of the mud out if you happen to have a catfish or something like that, bottom feeders. And so, like I say, small town. Everybody is friendly if you are. And for the most part, a small town, if you don't want to be bothered, you just don't respond. And most people will leave you alone. They'll think something's going on with you, but they will leave you alone. In this little town, that last little town I was in there, we actually had a night marshal, and he owned a dealership in the next town. So, but he had a house right there in town, and he was a hell of a guy. So that became my place of buying cars and stuff. Whenever I needed a vehicle, I always got a special deal. Everything's special deals, of course. And one of my best friends owned a supper club on the corner from where I lived, going up about 2 blocks. And I was right on the edge of town. Right, my neighbor across the road, he had cattle and a great big barn, and he had his own little winery. Believe it or not, he would buy and this was Italian town, by the way. He would buy huge amounts of grapes, and he made all his own wine. I don't know if anybody's ever had any Drapa, but he'd invite you for some Drapa, and it'll knock your socks off. That was his specialty. And he had some wine. It was more like a sparkling wine, carbonated, and it was good. It was really good. But if he offered you some of his special stuff, you knew that you were in good terms with him. And right next door, and he, like I say, he had that little kind of a small acreage. There was that wasn't all that small, I guess, because he owned some on the other side of the road too, which was, I can't remember exactly how much was there. I know when I moved into the house, there was a old Model A coupe in the basement, and when I rented the house, I looked at it and I said, "What the heck is this thing doing in there?" Because it was in pretty nice shape. And the landlady said, "Oh, I forgot about that. I said it belongs to the neighbor." And he came over and got in it, and it started right up. And he took it out of there, took it next door, put it in his barn over there. But the small town charm. And also in that town, there was a bakery, and they sold bread commercially. And quite a few people that lived in town, well, about everybody that worked in that little factory, and they're not very big, but they sold the bread, Italian bread. The equipment all come from Italy. And it so happened that farmer that lived right next or across the road from us, he did all the mechanic and maintenance work. He'd spent some time in Italy learning about how to take the equipment apart and put it back together and maintain it. And then came back, and they set that bakery up. So it was quite a deal. It was really something that most of the people there were Italian, and as a matter of fact, a lot of them spoke Italian. And I never did learn that much of it. But during garden season, they were like a lot of people were when I grew up. Somebody's always offering you tomatoes and zucchini, and it's just one of those things where everybody's family or they're not. They either liked you or they didn't. So, and it didn't take long to figure it out either. And the mayor was a heck of a nice guy. He was friends with everybody. He had kind of a small farm on the other side of town and a trucking business as well. It seems like small towns, a lot of the people, or a good portion of them, have a business of some kind. And then one of the guys that was in town used to play for the Redskins football. And when he retired pretty young, he retired because of a knee injury, he ended up being a distributor for Budweiser. And I made friends with him, but he was a big guy. He was a lot bigger than I was, that's for sure. But he's, always full of it. Good sense of humor. And boy, I don't know how much else I can tell you about, but it's the small town charm is what I'm trying to get across to you. And when I first looked at Otter Creek, I thought, there's probably a lot of that charm there if you look for it. And I don't know, there's no apparently taverns or real stores or anything like that there. The little Italian town that I lived in, it had a grocery store there too, a mom and pop style. Just a couple aisles was it. And I mean, the people lived in the other side of it. Their home was actually there where the store was. Nice people. And if you didn't have the exact change or whatever it was, you could always pay it next time you came back in there. They recognized everybody that lived there, and you automatically, were part. Your credit was good. Not that happened, but much, but kids could go up there, and they were good with kids and stuff. Everybody in town was. I mean, it's hard to explain it. If you haven't lived in a small town, you just don't know how to take the friendliness sometimes. And it's more trusting. I know we never had to worry whether our cars were locked or not, or the door was locked. It was just almost like family, the entire area. And you have, every town has a couple stinkers. Then you know pretty quick who it is and who to avoid, that's all. And you just stay away. And you always have to remember that blood's thicker than water. And if you get into it with somebody, you may be getting into half the town. Because I can tell you right now with certainty, a lot of the people are related in those small towns. So it's best to know who you're going to argue with before you ever start one. And that doesn't mean kowtow or anything like that. I'm just saying you have a little more tolerance until you get your feet on the ground, until you're accepted as part of the town. Let's put it that way. And they had a school. Once you go to high school, you had to go to another one. Once you're past 6th grade, I think it was, you had to go to this other town, next town. Now, being an Italian town, everybody makes wine. And the house that I actually rented, part of the basement was dedicated to wine barrels. Now, I didn't make wine. But I had wondered what it was set up for, and the landlady told me that the guy that used to own the house used to make his own wine, and that was set up with barrels. And he was friends with the guy that lived across from me, which makes sense. The next little town over, some of those homes had tunnels between homes even. And during Prohibition, it was a big item there. There was good money in buying and selling wine. And everybody kept the stuff hidden, obviously. I'm trying to, and there was a mining town is really what it was. And they had these great big, looked like mountains of red slag. And one of the guys that used to work in the mines, kind of an older fella, told me that they had pulled all that out of the mine. They didn't get paid for that. They only got paid for the coal that they dug out, which kind of surprised me. But and a lot of the guys around there were not real tall, but stocky. The mines fit. The people that do the best in the mine, actually, they're not real tall, but they're stocky. You have to be a certain size and strength if you're going to hold up and make enough money to live, something like that. And at one time, actually, the house that I lived in had been owned by the mining company. And in my backyard, there was a hole that kept appearing every once in a while. I mean, it didn't go very deep, but it was air shaft, I guess, and I didn't realize that. So I was always worried one of the kids, they might cave in and one of my kids go down in there, but we kept it filled in. And then I bought property next to it, going up on this kind of up the hill here on the side. All in all, it was quite an experience, and I wouldn't mind living there right now. But I live in a small town, and I guess it was by choice. I've lived in quite a few large towns. I mean, I've had an apartment in Chicago. My family, I had my kids in Houston, Texas, Louisiana. And when I lived in Louisiana, the town was, I don't know. Actually, it was Homer, Louisiana. It was a pretty fair-sized town. Houston, is big. I lived on the north side in a pretty nice subdivision up there. And my work was only less than a mile from my house. But it was a good 25-minute drive. The traffic there is horrendous, and it's bumper to bumper. Or it was then. I don't know if it is now. So I know what the big cities are like, and I know what the small ones are like. Now, when I was in California, I was lucky enough to stay in Avila Beach, and that's very small. Everybody knows everybody in Avila Beach, and it's a tourist area. We used to go to San Luis Obispo and places like that. We've been up to Carmel a few times, and the little towns out in California. Everybody in California when I was there, they were all friendly. Everybody. You go to a car show, it's people bend over backwards to show you their car, to talk about it. It's just a different atmosphere. So when I run across some of the things in Otter Creek, it was hard to believe how things got out of hand there. To this day, it's hard for me to believe it because I've never been in a situation where it could get out of hand that far. But I've never seen the characteristics of somebody like that in some of these other towns either. I've seen it in big towns or big corporations, but not in a small town. They don't fit the normal atmosphere. And some of you out there will probably argue with me. You're going to say, oh, no, there's a lot of odd people in these different towns. And all I can tell you is that I didn't see it that way, and maybe I wasn't looking for oddities. I was just looking for friendship when I'd move into a town, because it's always better than arguing or fighting with somebody. And the best way to avoid it is to go the other direction, if you can. You can't always, I know that. And I realize once in a while you get into a big hoorah. And you end up either defending yourself or having to do something. Your only choice is to fight or run. Fight or flight, that's what they call it. And it raises your hackles either way. That's all I got to say. Charm of a Small Town. That's going to be my title. Sorry I spent a whole hour on here just BSing and reminiscing a little bit. Like I say, I live in a small place. I preferred it. My children enjoyed the traveling that we did during construction. Small towns have the tendency that rental rates, or if you're buying a house or something like that, it's usually a little cheaper than buying in a big town. You pay an awful lot for the conveniences of a big city. And if you can drive there in 20 minutes to a half hour, who cares? You move out in a small town and you can even raise your kids better because you can watch them a lot closer. Everybody knows everybody, so you're going to know everything's going on. Usually the first person that comes over and welcomes you to town is the town gossip. You learn about everything there is to learn off from one or two people, and then you can proceed with how you're going to deal with everybody. And amazingly, to this day, I haven't had the kind of problems that went on in Otter Creek. And that, I guess it amazed me more than anything, because when I look at it, to me it looked like it was something that could have been settled very quickly and never needed to be in a court. I think it was, other reasons. And I've stated the reasons different times on here. Okay, well, that's it. Charms of a smaller town. Hope you enjoyed it. Ta-ta.